as an individual soul is to be eternally a servitor of the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. Self-realization does not mean that because the Supreme Soul and the individual soul are both souls, they are equal in every respect. The individual soul is prone to be conditioned, and the Supreme Soul is never conditioned. When the conditioned soul realizes that he is subordinate to the Supreme Soul, his position is called labdatma, self-realization, or mukta bandhana, freedom from material contamination. Material contamination continues as long as one thinks that he is as good as the Supreme Lord or is equal with him. This condition is the last snare of Maya. Maya always influences the conditioned soul, even after much meditation and speculation. If one continues to think himself one with the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that he's still in the last snares of the spell of Maya. The word pare nice is very significant. Para means transcendental, untinged by material contamination. Full consciousness that one is an eternal servant of the Lord is called para bhakti. If one has any identification with material things and executes devotional service for attainment of some material gain, that is Vidya Bhakti, contaminated Bhakti. One can actually become liberated by execution of Para Bhakti. Another word mentioned here is Sarva Gye. The super soul sitting within the heart is all cognizant. He knows. I may forget my past activities due to the change of body, but because the Supreme Lord, as Paramatma, is sitting within me, he knows everything. Therefore, the result of my past karma or past activities is awarded to me. I may forget, but he awards me suffering or enjoyment for the misdeeds or good deeds of my past life. One should not think that he is freed from reaction because he has forgotten the actions of his past life. Reactions will take place, and what kind of reactions there will be is judged by the super soul, the witness. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. So this is Canto 3, chapter 24, and it's verse 45. I'll read the verse again. Vasudeve Bhagavati Sarvagye Pratyag Atmani Parena Bhakti Bhavena Labdatma Muktabandhana. He thus became liberated from conditioned life and became self-situated in transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, the omniscient supersoul within everyone. Okay, so now we see what can happen if we get serious about Krishna consciousness. When you become serious about Krishna consciousness, every day you do the same thing. You wake up early, you take a bath, you chant Hare Krishna, you hear Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, you eat only prasadam, you engage in Sankirtan if you have a chance, and you regularly hear the Shastras spoken by devotees, and you also have a chance to engage in devotional service, and so on. These are things in the normal life of a devotee. So this only happens when the devotee stops identifying himself with the body but on the other hand, identifies himself as a spirit soul in relationship to Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead. And when one identifies like that, then, as it says here in this verse today, Canto 3, chapter 24, verse number 45, he thus became liberated from conditioned life and became self-situated in transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead Vasudeva, the omniscient super soul within everyone. Well, people usually seek spiritual knowledge or spiritual, let's say, achievements, whatever, outside. But here it's making it very clear that our search should be inside. Yeah, because Krishna is in the heart. He's everywhere. He's outside also. But we should most let's say significantly realize the presence of Krishna within our hearts. That is the first step toward becoming a civilized living being, and then we begin to change the way we act. The first and foremost thing everyone should learn, and especially children, is there's no question of privacy. Krishna is in the heart. He knows everything we're thinking, everything we're desiring, and everything we're doing. So we cannot hide that. That should be very carefully and regularly, let's say, repeated, because people will commit sinful activities because they think they can get away with it. But how can you get away with anything when Krishna is sitting in your heart and he knows everything you're thinking, everything you're desiring to do, everything you actually do? So it's impossible to not be witnessed. The witness is always Krishna, the ultimate witness. There are other witnesses also, but Krishna is the most, let's say, uh, the most present witness in our life of everything we do. These are things that we have to learn by hearing from bona fide devotees. Otherwise, we come up with false concepts such as, oh, I think I can get away with this because there's no witness. No, there's always going to be a witness, uh, an external witness, and the ultimate internal witness, who is Krishna himself. Therefore, most people don't talk like this, don't think like this, don't act like this. Therefore, they think they can get away with things. Just like one time there was a devotee and he was cheating on his wife. And I said to him, after he got caught cheating on his wife, I said to him, why did you do that? And I mean, it's wrong. He said, yeah, I know it's wrong, but I thought I could get away with it. You can't get away with anything. They, uh, why? Because there's an ultimate witness. The ultimate witness is Krishna himself. So there's no getting away with anything. Therefore, uh, Krishna is not an ordinary living being. He's the supreme personality of Godhead. He has no limitations. He can expand himself infinitely into millions and millions of different forms without being diminished in any way. And he has supernatural powers that other people cannot emulate. In fact, he can expand himself infinitely to be everywhere at one time. Nobody else has that power. So there's no way of getting away with anything. There's no way of hiding anything. Okay, so And also, Krishna himself is not affected by the modes of material nature. Uh, the modes of material nature, well, we are affected by the modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and therefore we get into trouble. But Krishna is transcendental to these modes of material nature. To understand Krishna consciousness, you have to come to the same position as Krishna, being transcendental to the modes of material nature. Now, it's possible for every human being, not for the animals, but every human being has the potential to supersede the influence of the modes of material nature. But the only way they can do that is by being engaged in devotional service under the tutelage or under the, let's say, uh, under the uh, by having a spiritual master who can correct us when we make mistakes. You see, some people think, oh, I don't need a spiritual master. I know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. It's not true. The real purpose of having a spiritual master is because now you have someone who can point out your uh, your faults and correct them, help you to correct them. And the spiritual master is supposed to do that. He doesn't, let's say, always say nice things so that he can get money from you, right? You say, no, spiritual master. Sometimes people like to control the spiritual master by giving him money and doing different things, and then thinking that now I'm controlling my guru. You cannot control a bona fide guru. Some people think they can, and it's still usually money oriented. And there are a lot of people in this world who have money and exercise control over others because they have so much money. And they think that they can train people to do whatever they want because of the money that they have and the enticement of that they sort of uh, are able to control people by the fact that they are giving them money, they're giving them a place to stay, they're doing this, they're doing that, and then they hook a person to a certain level of material sense gratification that they don't want to lose. Therefore, they're willing to do almost anything to maintain that sense gratification. But that's not possible for a genuine devotee. A genuine devotee is not attached to sense gratification. Therefore, he cannot be controlled by money oriented people. Most people are controlled by money oriented people, and therefore they become, uh, let's say, in illusion, thinking that the more money they get, the more advancement they'll make in spiritual life and in material life. But uh, and then there are people who have a lot of money and they think they can control people by the fact that they have so much money, and people become like their slaves, not physically enslavement, but mental enslavement. Mental enslavement means that you're afraid to speak the truth because you might be rejected by the rich man. Okay? So uh, that's a very bad position to be in. Devotees, real devotees, are independent of material, let's say, intimidations. They have a they have complete faith in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, if someone uh, threatens them that, oh, well, you'll lose your job unless you do this, okay, look, I don't care. I'll lose my job. I have complete faith in Krishna. See, there was once uh, a Muslim who purchased a company that was owned by uh, a Hindu, and almost all the workers were Hindus. So the first day the Muslim took over the company, he called a meeting of all the workers, and he said, "Well, now I'm your new boss, and if you come to work with that red stuff on your forehead, you're going to get fired." So the next day, every day he had this early morning meeting, and he would talk to everyone and see them and so forth before they started work, and they would talk about what they're going to do that day. And so the next day, all the Hindus took off the red dot on their forehead, right? Except for one person. So he did an inspection of everyone, and he comes up to the man who didn't take off the red dot on his forehead, and he says, "What is this?" And the Hindu man said, "What do you mean? What is this?" He said, "You did not take this red dot off your forehead?" He said, "No." He said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I'm not going to be intimidated by you. This is my religion, and I'm not going to give it up for anything. So if you want to fire me, you can fire me right now. I'll leave." So the Muslim man said, he looked at all the other Hindus who had taken off the dot, and they said, "You see, this is a real person here. He's not afraid. He has complete faith in his God." He said, "So he can wear the dot." But everybody else had taken it off because of their fear. He said, "But the rest of you can't wear it anymore." So you see, we should not be intimidated by people. If we have strong conviction of our faith in Krishna, then we should not be intimidated. Of course, we shouldn't stick our head into the mouth of a lion, you know, thinking, "Well, I'm invincible because Krishna will protect me." No, that would be stupid, because the lion will, bite off your head. But the other hand, we should not be afraid of the lion because we should have complete faith in Krishna. And by the way, animals usually don't attack someone when they're not hungry. They only attack when either they feel they feel as if someone might attack them, or if they're very hungry. But if they're not hungry and they don't feel, you know, uh, let's say, uh, intimidated by anyone, then they just leave you alone. There was this one lady, she ran away from home. This one girl, she ran away from home because she was in a family where a Muslim family where they force their children, their female children, to have their vagina. Uh, they do some kind of a medical thing where the girl can never really feel any pleasure from sex. Say they cut something off from the vagina. So uh, this one girl ran away from her parents' house because she didn't want that to happen, and it's painful in the first place, and it would mean that she would never have any pleasure when she has sex. And I don't know if she was worried about that as much as the horror of having her vagina, cut or uh, you know, some way uh, uh, have a surgical thing that happens to her, and she ran away. And eventually, her parents couldn't find her, and she ran so far away that she was in the jungle and exhausted, and there were a lot of wild animals in that jungle. and one uh, lion. Uh, she was exhausted. She had been running, and she was resting somewhere. And a lion came, and he was looking at her, and she was scared out of her wits. And the lion came very close to her, and she was just, you know, she was like, didn't try and run away. And the lion looked at her, and she looked at him, and then he went away. Yeah. So he was not hungry. That's the whole point. If he had been really hungry, or if he felt as if he was being challenged, he would probably have killed her. But he just looked at her. She looked at him, and then he walked away. So this girl was being protected by Krishna, because she had never committed any sinful activities in her life. She was still very young, and uh, and she had run away from her parents because they were going to, do this surgical thing on her vagina, and she was afraid of it, and it's painful also for the little girls, and so she was protected by Krishna. Let's put it like that. And then the rest of her life, she uh, she became a model, and because she was a very pretty uh, girl. She was black African woman, but she was basically, over time she became a model, and started making a lot of money and so forth. So, but she went through a lot of horrendous experiences trying to get away from her parents who were going to mutilate her vagina, and she didn't want that. So, uh, there are different things that happen in life, and everybody has their stories. But the main thing is, if one is Krishna conscious, even in the most horrible situations, they will be protected, right, by Krishna's mercy. And I saw that, like, in the history of my mother. Her whole family was massacred, and as a 7 year old girl, she was on her own in the desert, and miraculously she was saved, and went on to have, to grow up, and then have family and so forth. But there was one period in her life when she was only like 6, 7 years old. Uh, she was alone in the desert, and all her parents, all her family members were massacred. But somehow or other, she, uh, you know, survived. Well, she survived because a Muslim family adopted her. They saw this little girl in the desert, and obviously her family was massacred, and they decided to adopt her. And my mother was a Muslim now for about until she was about 16 years old. And by that time, she was able to go away and get away from the Muslim family and so forth. So you see, there are some people that, because they're not sinful, and they're completely dependent on God, they're protected even in the worst situations. You know? So here it says, we are conditioned souls, but he is not affected. Or not, let's say, let me read it. In other words, although the material energy is an emanation of the Supreme Lord, he is not affected, as we are, by the modes of material nature. We are conditioned souls, but he, meaning Krishna, is not affected, although the material nature has emanated from him. He is the supreme living entity. He is never affected by Maya, but we are subordinate, minute living entities, prone to be affected by the limitation of Maya. If he is in constant, now he's talking about the living entity, if he is in constant contact with the Supreme Lord by devotional service, the conditioned living entity also becomes freed from the infection of Maya. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Sagunam samatit yaitan. A person engaged in Krishna consciousness is at once liberated from the influence of the three modes of material nature. In other words, once the conditioned soul engages himself in devotional service, he also becomes liberated like the Lord. Now, this is something we should write down and put on a wall somewhere and read it every day and remind ourselves that this is a very wonderful statement, and it's a factual statement. It's not let's say, a fantasy statement. It's real, and we should take it to heart. A person engaged in Krishna consciousness is at once liberated from the influence of the three modes of material nature. In other words, once the conditioned soul engages himself in devotional service, he also becomes liberated like the Lord. Well, Krishna is not affected by, in any way, by the modes of material nature. Uh, and so we can attain that same transcendental position by being engaged always in devotional service. Devotional service is the key to liberation in this world. Even though we have a material body, even though the body is more or less subjected or controlled by the modes of material nature, but if we engage in devotional service, we can become free of that influence of the modes of material nature and have a spiritual life, even in the most harrowing or difficult situations. Haribol. So if he is in constant contact with the Supreme Lord by devotional service, the conditioned living entity also becomes freed from the infection of Maya. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Sagunam Samatit Yaitan. A person engaged in Krishna consciousness is at once liberated from the influence of the three modes of material nature. In other words, once the conditioned soul engages himself in devotional service, he also becomes liberated like the Lord. So that's our takeaway for today and for the rest of our life. In fact, this is something we should print. I do. We should print this.
Where it is, Maharaj, exactly?
Okay, it's the end of.
This is the 43rd verse. 43rd.
Yeah, it's the end, right at the end.
Yes, yes, I found. So starting, Maharaj, where should we start?
Let's see. If instead of say he, instead of saying he, if a devotee is in constant contact with the Supreme Lord by devotional service, the conditioned living entity also becomes freed from the infection of Maya. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Sagunam Samatityayata. A person engaged in Krishna consciousness is at once liberated from the influence of the three modes of material nature. In other words, once the conditioned soul engages himself in devotional service, he also becomes liberated like the Lord. There it is. It's our takeaway for the rest of our life. This one statement. You see how powerful Prabhupada's purports are. If we believe them, if we remember them and believe them, then our whole life changes. If we just, I mean, if we do some, what is it called? Uh, there are people that do real fast reading. What is that called?
Speed read?
Yeah, we speed read the Shastra. We won't understand anything. But if we read carefully and we repeat it many times, then eventually it'll sink into the mind and it will protect us from making mistakes. speed reading is not really good. Of course, a lot of people, they say, "Well, I'm a speed reader," and then they put their finger somewhere, and the finger moves real fast. I say, "Well, yeah, now I know. No, now I know what this verse is." But no, you have to go slowly, verse by verse, sentence by sentence, word by word, to understand the Shastra. And repetition is very highly recommended in spiritual life because what is our disease? We easily forget things. Therefore, repetition is very important. Sometimes people say, "Well, I'm not interested in reading Prabhupada, purports. I just read the verses." And if you ask them why is that, well, he says the same thing. Chant Hare Krishna, you'll be happy. Yeah, I've heard that so many times. That's all. That's all they're talking about. So how to chant Hare Krishna. And, no, every purport is actually different. Uh, and if you develop the taste for hearing carefully Prabhupada's purports, you'll realize there's something new in every purport. But there is also a lot of things that are being repeated because repetition is important in Vedic when you're pursuing Vedic knowledge, because we have faults, we easily illusion, and we forget things very often, and therefore it's important to repeat things regularly so that we don't forget them. Therefore, it says, if he is in constant contact with the Supreme Lord by devotional service, the conditioned living entity also becomes freed from the infection of Maya. Maya, what does Maya do? She makes you forget Krishna. In order to commit sinful activities, a person has to forget Krishna. You see, uh, they have to think, well, nobody's seen, the thief, as long as he feels that no one is a witness of what he's doing, he feels safe. But that's impossible. Krishna is the ultimate witness of everything we do. So these are all misconceptions. But the thieves and the cheaters and the liars, they always think they can get away with something by being more clever than everyone else. But you can't cheat Krishna because he's right in your heart and he is watching everything we do. So unless we understand that, we can at one point think we can get away with things. And the example is, I had a friend of mine. He was cheating on his wife, and then he got caught. And I said, "Why did you do this? You have such a nice wife." He said, "I thought I could get away with it." You can't. We can't get away with anything. That's because that person I was talking to, he never really came to class. He was initiated, right? But he never came to any of the classes. So at one point he thought he could get away with it. But how can you get away from Paramatma? It's not possible. Okay, so now we'll go on text 44, unless there are any questions. Okay, so text 44.
We were on text 45, Maharaj.
I'm sorry, text 45. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Text 45. Vasudeve Bhagavati Sarvag Ye Pratyag Atmani Parena Bhakti Bhavena Labdatma Mukta Bandhana. He thus became liberated from conditioned life and became self-situated in transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead, the omniscient super soul within everyone. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When one engages in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, one becomes aware that his constitutional position as an individual soul is to be eternally a servitor of the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. Vasudeva means Krishna. It's another name of Krishna. Self-realization does not mean that because the super soul and the individual soul are both souls, they are equal in every respect. The individual soul is prone to be conditioned, and the supreme soul is never conditioned. When the conditioned soul realizes that he is subordinate to the supreme soul, his position is called labdatma, self-realization, or mukta bandhana, freedom from material contamination. Material contamination continues as long as one thinks that he is as good as the Supreme Lord or is equal with him. This condition is the last snare of Maya. Maya always influences the conditioned soul. A snare means the last trap of Maya. If even after Maya always influences the conditioned soul, even after even after much meditation and speculation. If one continues to think himself one with the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that he is still in the last snares, the last grip of the spell of Maya. The word parena is very significant. Para means transcendental, untinged by material contamination. Full consciousness that one is an eternal servant of the Lord is called parabhakti. If one has any identification with material things and executes devotional service for attainment of some material gain, that is vidha bhakti, contaminated bhakti. One can actually become liberated by execution of para bhakti, as transcendental bhakti. Another word mentioned here is sarvagye. I think that's the way to pronounce it. Gay, J.
The Sanskrit sound.
Sarvagye.
Yeah.
The super soul sitting within the heart is all cognizant. He knows I may forget my past activities due to the change of body. But because the Supreme Lord as Paramatma is sitting within me, he knows everything. Therefore, the result of my past karma or past activities is awarded to me. I may forget, but he awards me suffering or enjoyment for the misdeeds or good deeds of my past life. One should not think that he is freed from reaction because he has forgotten the actions of his past life. Reactions will take place, and what kind of reactions there will be is judged by the supersoul, the witness. Well, this is why I joined Krishna consciousness. I've said this before, because I realized when I was learning a little bit about Krishna consciousness that I had bad karma. I was born in a family of meat eaters, and for a long time I was feeling, you know, as if I was a failure and I was suffering different ways. And when I heard statements like this in the Shastras, uh, one should not think he is freed from the reaction because he has forgotten the actions of his past life. Reactions will take place. And what kind of reactions there will be is judged by the supersoul, the witness. Well, I realized I was having bad reactions in one time of my life before I was Krishna conscious. But when I tried to become Krishna conscious, I realized that the only way I could become free from my previous karma, which I knew was bad, it was by becoming a devotee and taking up devotional service. That's what convinced me to try and become a devotee. So, uh, one time there was a man who was in jail. He murdered somebody. And one day he got in a fight with uh, you know, another convict in jail. And the other convict, he got a chair and banged him on his head. And he fainted. And when he woke up, and he was in a hospital, and in the jail hospital, and he said, where am I right now? They said, well, you're in the jail. I said, jail? I said, why am I in jail? They said, well, you made some mistakes in your life. I said, I don't remember making any mistakes. He said, can you call the warden? I'm going to tell him that I don't belong here because I don't remember doing anything wrong. So the warden comes and says, what is it? You want to talk to me? He said, yeah, I don't belong here. I don't remember doing anything wrong. He said, no, you don't remember, but we have a whole dossier about all the wrong things you did. So you're not getting out of here at all. So that's not an excuse, you know. Forgetfulness is not an excuse. And by the way, we can forget so many things, but Krishna doesn't forget anything, you know. And also Yamaraj doesn't forget anything. So therefore, if we surrender to Krishna, then we have a chance of becoming free from our previous karma. Not immediately. At first, the karma will be put on hold because unless it's put on hold, we will not be able to engage in devotional service. But as we continue faithfully, year after year in Krishna consciousness, eventually all the karma goes away. And it doesn't go away at first. It's just simply put on hold. But as we continue in Krishna consciousness, little by little, it goes away, and now we're free completely. We see that sometimes, someone will become a devotee, and after, a couple weeks or a couple years, they run away, Krishna consciousness. And what happens? They go back doing what they did before. That's because the karma did not really go away, it was put on hold. But the more we stay in Krishna consciousness, little by little, it goes away completely, and we're completely free. So, therefore, regulated devotional service is the solution to all problems of life. Under the supervision of bona fide devotees. It has to be under the supervision of bona fide devotees because otherwise you have nobody else that can tell you what you're doing wrong. See? The real duty of a guru is to chastise the devotee when he makes mistakes. If you don't have anyone to do that, then you can just keep on making the same mistakes over and over again. There has to be someone that can chastise you to stop doing things in this way or that way and become more fixed up in strict Krishna consciousness. Okay. Are there any questions? Material contamination continues as long as one thinks that he is as good as the Supreme Lord or is equal with him. This condition is the last snare, meaning the last, let's say, entanglement of Maya. Maya always influences the conditioned soul, even after much meditation and speculation. If one continues to think himself one with the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that he's still in the last snares or the last, let's say, grip of the spell of Maya.
It's a trap.
A trap, yes. Very good. So, therefore, when a devotee becomes humble and meek and engages in regulated devotional service, there's a possibility of becoming free from the trap or snare or control of Maya.
But Prabhupada uses wonderful words to make things clearer. For example, people think that okay, it's okay to be in the spirituality path as long as it's okay to accept any path as long as it is so-called spirituality. That's how many people justify following Mayavada's philosophy. It's better than nothing. But then that's also Maya.
Well, there's a saying that all roads lead to Rome.
That's what they say.
Yeah, yeah, but all speculations don't lead to spiritual, the Krishna consciousness or Vaikuntha. You have to be purified. It says here, if one continues to think himself one with the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that he is still in the last snares of the spell of Maya. There it is. Yeah.
Even all roads lead to Rome is not 100% accurate, right, Maharaj? In the
Yeah.
end, there's only one road that leads to Rome. Eventually, you have to get onto that road. You might take a flight, you might take a ship.
All roads lead to Rome means whatever you do, you get to the same place. So whether you,
Yeah, but that same place is bhakti.
it's what?
Bhakti.
Yes.
That's what even Bhagavad Gita Krishna is saying. Like, okay, you can be jnani, but eventually you have to realize Vasudeva Sarvamiti.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can be a yogi, but then
But you can't just do anything and think that you're going to make spiritual progress. Yeah, there's specific things that you have to do. Some people think, well, I don't eat meat, I don't have illicit sex, and I don't really think it's necessary to chant Hare Krishna. I'm living a good life. I don't hurt anybody, so I'm satisfied with the way I'm living. Well, sorry, sir. That's not the right way to become Krishna conscious. It might be helpful to have a better material life, but it's not enough to have a spiritual life. But a lot of people say, look, I don't do anything wrong. I don't cheat. I don't lie. I take care of my family. So I don't really need to be, Hare Krishna. But that's not right. You you can be the best karmi in the world. You're still going to take birth and death. You're still going to experience birth and death because you haven't developed love for Krishna. They think, well, I don't hurt anybody. I don't lie. I don't cheat. I take care of my family. That's enough for me. I'm not a bad person. Okay, maybe I eat meat sometimes. All right, and maybe sometimes I have a little extra sex, but I don't hurt anybody.
Many people give this justification, Maharaj, like who they don't want to take to Krishna consciousness, but they say we are doing all good.
Yeah, we're not hurting anybody.
This term is like it's very common.
Yeah. So here it says material contamination continues as long as one thinks that he is as good as the Supreme Lord or is equal with him. This condition is the last snare, meaning trap, of Maya. Maya always influences the conditioned soul. Even after much meditation and speculation, if one continues to think himself one with the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that he is still in the last snares or traps of the spell of Maya. Now, see, this is a very important statement. The whole point of spiritual life is to admit that we are all subordinate. to God. Many people think that, okay, he's God. He lifted Govardhan Hill. Maybe I can do that too. I just work out every day in the gym. I'll be able to lift Govardhan Hill also. They think that they can emulate everything that God does by exercise or by one technique or another technique. So as long as they have this false ego, it's very difficult to surrender to Krishna, because spiritual life begins from the point we actually surrender to the Lord. And there's this one man, his name in British, well, while the British were still in charge of India, his name was Surendranath. So the British said, "Oh, he surrenders not to anyone." We were having problems with him. So yeah, his name is correct. He surrenders not. Well, the whole spiritual life is all about accepting the fact that there's someone greater than us. And that someone is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we think that, oh, well, maybe he's a little bit better than me, but I'll catch up to him by doing this thing or doing that thing. No, we have to accept the fact that we are always subordinate to Krishna. It's very difficult for some people to accept that they're subordinate. They have such a strong false ego. They think they can do anything, even emulate God. And you see some people who try and do that, like what's his name? Put on two fake arms. Foundraga, yeah. He thought that he could be equal to God. He's quickly learned the lesson that he wasn't. Okay, are there any more questions?
Any more questions online?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Very well, thank you.
Maharaj, as we are talking about this topic, that most of the people may not accept Krishna consciousness, and they are still with that sattvic conscious and always meditating either Vishnu or other forms of Krishna. So is there a need for us to tell them anything, or just as you always tell us, they will watch you and they will learn? So how do you take up that uh, for people, who you are close to, and they still pray other forms of Krishna but not Krishna conscious? Is there anything we have to say or nothing?
Okay, that's a very good question. And it definitely, in the Bhagavad Gita, let's see, Bhagavad Gita, it says that we shouldn't agitate the minds of people. Let them learn by our good example. If we agitate their minds by saying, well, what you're doing is wrong, this other thing is wrong, and this other thing is wrong, their false ego takes over, and you won't be able to communicate with that person anymore. They won't want to listen to what you say, right? Because they have such a big false ego. However, by steady practice of Krishna consciousness with a pure heart, and especially by giving a lot of prasadam to people, at that point, there's a possibility that they can become Krishna conscious. In other words, your preaching is through prasadam and through, becoming a well-wisher of that person by giving them prasadam and by inviting them to come to different programs that we have. And when they see that you're a genuine person, you're not a fake, and that you're always giving them prasadam. Like myself, when I first came in contact with Krishna, that was because, the first time I came in contact with the devotees, the next day I met George Washington, Harrison. Actually, Prabhupada says his name is Hari's son. Hari's son. So, and then I realized, I said, wait a minute, this Krishna consciousness is something powerful. I'm just a nobody. And the first day I came to and got in touch with devotees, they took me to meet George Harrison, and I made a record with him. And I was like, it was overwhelming for me. So, I mean, that not happened to everyone, but coming in contact with genuine devotees is a very influential, let's say, moment in the life of a person. When you come in contact with someone who's giving you prasadam in different ways. As far as the food goes, it's prasadam, but it's also speaking nicely to people, giving them some basic knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and always being a well-wisher and being with them when they're in trouble or difficulty. All these things count because people feel indebted. They'll say, oh, nobody else came to see me in the hospital, but you came. And no one else was giving me a gift. Like one time, this homeless person came to our food truck, and he had never been there. He had never come to the food truck before. And when he got this, big plate of prasadam, and it was, fresh and very warm, he started to cry. He said, "No one's ever been kind to me like you guys." He was having a lot of difficulty in his life. So when devotees are givers and they give something that's substantial, which is love for Krishna and expressed through a very nice prasadam, and by showing respect, not looking down on the homeless people. Uh, Homeless people can tell if you are actually a well-wisher of them, or if you look at them as being bums and low-class people. They can tell by the way you hand them the prasadam or by the way you speak. I've seen homeless people refuse to take prasadam, although they were hungry, because the way the devotee acted and the way the devotee, handed the prasadam to them, they realize this person thinks that I'm really low class, doesn't have any respect for me, and that gentleman refused the prasadam and walked away. He felt as if he was being that the devotee that was serving him didn't have any respect at all for him. So that might be a false ego of that person, but yet everybody has a certain level of, let's say, expectation of how they like to be treated. And if they're treated as if they're just a bum, and even though they might be a bum, but they're treated like that, and it hurts them, and they'll walk away. So, but if they feel as if, wow, this is a really humble person, and he's kind, and he speaks nicely to me, and he's handing me this big plate of holy food, they get touched. They get it. It's something that they might never forget the rest of their life. So we should be uh, always kind and gentle with people.
We have that sentence, right, Maharaj? Like feeding people with respect.
That's my statement.
Yeah, I think on the food truck you
Yes.
did that.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to. If we do that, we don't say, "Well, you're just a bum," but you'll just take this food and go away. No, you have to give with respect. Then they it touches their heart, because most people don't respect them. But when you feed people with respect and are ready to give them more than simply the prasadam, that is ready to give them Krishna consciousness if they want it. You can't force it on them. But if they want to know more about Krishna consciousness, like many times it starts like that. They come because they're hungry. But after some time, they get curious to say, well, what is your Krishna consciousness all about? In other words, they're ready to be preached to.
Yeah.
But if you force them, then they'll reject it and they won't even come anymore. They'll think, oh, this is just a sect. They're just trying to make me a Hare Krishna. But after a long time of observation of the humility and goodness of devotees, they eventually become curious. Well, how come you guys are so nice? Why do you do this? What's your temple? They'll start asking questions. But right away, it won't happen. Or usually, they have to see if you're genuine, and if you don't have any ultra, if they think, well, you're giving me this food because you want me to
What's
become
the
a
catch?
devotee.
Catch.
Yeah, what's the catch? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we don't have any questions, and we will stop there for 11 hours
Yes.
and pick it up again. Haribol.
Hare, Hare
Thank
Krishna.
All praise
thank
to
you,
Shiva.
Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare. Everybody have a very good day today. Chant all your rounds and more, and be happy. Hare Krishna.